With merit, there are 8 elements. However, when it's in practice, it's far more synergistic than having 8 elements that you might run through. There is no specific way to go through a therapist session by running through all those elements, but it's a good way to conceptualize and manualize what is merit therapy.
So mastery is a tricky word. In Dutch, it had no direct translation. Its translation into Italian was tricky as well. But we've used it based on the work of Semerari to capture how it is people make sense of and respond to the world in an ongoing and reflective manner. And the idea here would be that we know ourselves not just as we experience the world, but we know ourselves in terms of how we respond to the world, how we make sense of and act. And that's why, I mean, what's really troubling to us is if we lose our cool and our terse with someone, we're like, wow, that's not me. So it isn't me because I have this strange internal thing that feels like not me, but because I act in ways, I respond to the world that doesn't match how I think about myself. So I'm short with someone, I'm uncompassionate, I'm passive when I should stand up, I'm confused when I think I should know what I'm doing. Do things that I realize are opening the door for self-destructive activities, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So mastery is the central thing. And it's how we know ourselves. And I think in some way, in the deepest way, it's how we act in the world. And the scale itself consists of 9 levels. So an interesting idea that came up in a discussion with people at Boston University at their psychiatric rehabilitation group is that this really is a distinct idea from coping. That mastery is not the same thing as coping with something. That it's really a way of making sense and living with a set of dilemmas and possibilities in an ongoing way. So you might say, what's my coping like? Because I'm an active coper. And I need to think about it. I need to respond. You may say my coping should improve because I'm a passive coper. And I need to, again, you know, be more direct in what I do. Mastery is to think about each individual unique situation and respond to it in a way that makes sense. Such that if I'm in a conflict with someone, I realize that this particular person, things never go well unless I hide out for a while and avoid them. And then that's the best possible strategy. On the other hand, someone else, it may be Armageddon if I don't respond right away and reach out to them. So mastery is this ongoing, responsive way that we try to deal with things. So let me see if I can share screen. That. My own skills are growing. Okay, does that show up? Okay, all right. So this is the first 5, and then we'll get to the last couple on the next slide. But so mastery is knowing to leave this person alone who, when we have a conflict, explodes if I go too soon, or going to the person who doesn't. Mastery is also realizing, for example, that when I start to feel a certain way, if I feel unappreciated, for example, I realize that I tend to overreact and I say things that cause trouble. And I know that because it's happened like 500 times in my life. But this is me knowing myself and using that as a guide to respond. And it has to be an evolving system. One key thing for all of these scales, especially the ones, well, all of them, because those are the ones we've talked about, is we're talking about an evolving understanding and not a static or stationary one. So my sense of everyone I deal with is always changing because they're changing. Like Robert was saying, things end, things are born, disappointments happen in our lives, exciting things happen, new opportunities happen, etc. Through failures, successes. And this is about an ongoing responsive system to know what's happening and then dealing with it. And at the lowest levels, there is no challenge at all. And it may be unfair to apply exactly to what you've presented, Alex, but one of the parties says nothing's wrong. So this is M0, in which there is no plausible problem at all. Everything is okay. There's nothing going on. Therefore, there's no response. This could be someone with dementia. This could be someone with severe psychosis who just doesn't realize anything is wrong. They can't get their handle on a problem. And perhaps also to Alex's case presentation in Merit, the idea then is you don't force the problem down the person's throat. You don't say, gee, do you realize when you hear voices, that's a symptom of an illness? Or do you realize you haven't worked in 20 years? Let's think, or do you realize you're being paranoid? Those things don't work. Or at least in my experience, they don't work. But so Merit, you would respond basically at the level that the person has, which is you can't tell there's a problem. Perhaps it seems like other people think there's a problem, but best you can tell, nothing's wrong. And in fact, any suggestion by me that something's wrong would be a problem. And someone who's at M0 can't get a higher score because they can't formulate a reasonable response. At M1, which perhaps is the second party in Alex's presentation, there is a problem, but there's not a plausible explanation for it, such as they're all against me, they're reading my mind, there's some sort of poison being put in my food that's trying to change my gender, et cetera, et cetera. And also in Merit, our goal here is not to turn around and then say, do you realize that's not plausible? Let's come up with a more reasonable explanation, but to work with the person at that level. The best you can tell, the best answer you have is this person's going to get you. No matter what you do, they're going to do something that's going to end in your humiliation. And all you can do is prepare against that and to look for every possible thing that can go wrong. I'm thinking of a patient I worked with who was very much at this level, and his paranoia was about a family member related to his partner. And he was convinced this person was going to undo him. And we noticed that when the family member wasn't around, that was because he was plotting. If he was around, it's because he was going to enact his plot, the family member. And then what the patient is able to do is said, all I do is I spend all my time preparing against this. And it's exhausting. I realize when I pull up and I see the family member's car, I start to panic, and then everything just goes south. Then we move, you can see this patient moving to M2, which is, I have a challenge, but there's nothing I can do about it. I'm paralyzed by the sense that I'm going to be attacked. I'm going to be annihilated. I'll be killed. I'll be forced to do humiliating things, etc. And all I can, and the plausible thing is I have fear and I don't know what to do about it. So the plausibility here is that I'm in a distressed state. I'm confused. I have no idea what to do. And at M2, someone has a plausible problem. It can't be a symptom. It has to be a recognizable, relatable human state. And they're stuck. I'm sort of screwed. I have this overwhelming thought. I can only think about that this person's going to get me, and I can't get that thought out of my head. Certainly have worked with people, and this is the monologue that they have. The only thought that repeats over and over again is, I'm going to be harmed, I'm going to be hurt. They can't get another thought in their heads. And it might be that for staff members who present cases and realize this is what patients go through, they can start to recognize some of their own mental processes and what they do themselves. If I'm honest with myself, I have to say that my years of doing this have forced me to see all sorts of things about myself I'd rather not see. I don't want to see that I get edgy when people don't appreciate me, because that makes me seem like sort of a small idiot. But the sad news is, it's true about me. But that knowledge then enables me to do all sorts of things that help me to have a healthier life. It's an interesting side point that this goes against some of the mentalizing literature, which would say that mentalizing comes through only secure attachment. And in the case of Merit and in metacognition, our idea is that mentalizing can help people who are insecurely attached, because they can realize how to not screw up relationships. They can realize how to manage anxieties and fears that emerge in the moment that aren't constructive. All right. So in any event, I think this sort of presentation helps us to understand at M2, the person has no coping, they have no responses, or they have no mastery. There's no reasonable way for them to seek equilibrium. At the third level, what the person can do is avoid stuff. And from here on out, we're going to give the person the score of the highest thing they can do. So once you have a plausible explanation for something, each level describes an activity that places a greater load on the metacognitive system. So if we have a battery that powers metacognition, each level draws more strongly on that. And we need greater metacognitive charge to be able to do it. So at the simplest thing, I just avoid it. I just escape.
Paul, if I can just very briefly interrupt,
Yeah.
would that sort of include, if we're thinking about gross avoidance or escapism, uh, like chronic alcohol use, for example, if someone is able to identify a problem, but they sort of say that they cope with it through drinking, or is that a higher level of metacognitive capacity?
Well, and so we've thought about things like cutting as not counting, or significant alcohol abuse also is not counting, or being avoidant. We've thought about I merely passively comply with professionals also as M3. So we've counted that as avoidance too, because it's not me responding. I'm just following the doctor's orders. I go to group, I write in my journal, whatever, but it's not me as an agent doing anything. So at 4, what you can do is you can at least turn to someone else for comfort. You can say, I can be around someone. So this would be any of us if someone has died suddenly and you're in shock and you are in enormous pain, but it's good to be around another human being. There's nothing you can do about it. I don't even know how to think about it. It makes no sense. It's tragic, it's overwhelming, but company feels good. So this is at least being able to go to someone and getting some help from their company, their warmth, their understanding. And it's like, I realize I have to see my therapist because he or she understands. That could count. That would be M4. So at 3, I'm hiding out. I'm not leaving my place. At 4, I'm going to go to someone else for comfort. At 5, I'm going to make myself do something about it. And this is, I don't know, you've had a bad breakup and you realize I feel terrible. If I stay inside, it's going to suck. I'm going to cycle. It's raining outside, but I don't care. I'm getting on my bicycle. I'm going to ride for a little bit. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go shopping. I'm going to go to a concert. I'm going to make myself do something. And this is a behavioral imposition on myself. And this could be, I've decided I need to take more medicine. I've decided I need to work with my psychiatrist to change my medicine, would count as 5 as well. There's some action I'm going to take in the world. So at 4, I'm just going to count on you. At 5, I'm going to do something. And theoretically, each of these, again, requires a little more of me metacognitively to think about. And it requires, again, my awareness of it. Like, holy crap, I've got to get out of the house. I can't stay here. I need to move around. I need to do something. And so that's M5. At 6, I can change how I think about things. And so this is what the people in Alex's story struggle to do. They can't find a different way to think about it. And this is just like, I've got to think about more positive things. I've got to stop ruminating about this. Here we're altering mental activities. So in 5, I'm just getting on my bicycle or going and, going for a walk. At 6, I've got to look at I've got to stop this negative view. I can't stop thinking everything's going to be doomed. That's ridiculous. And this is quite higher than avoiding the situation or just remaining in a paranoid state. At 7, though, I realized something about myself. And so this is my story about overreacting when I don't feel appreciated. So this is something I know about myself. It's likely not true about most of you, but other things are true about you. So this is sort of knowing yourself and realizing how you are in the world in ways that get you in trouble. So perhaps for the person in the more paranoid stance in Alex's story, the suggestion of the art of war might say to this guy, but this is how you are. You dig in, you get in battles, you fight with people. This is your go-to. And maybe there's 1 in every 50 times where that's a really stupid idea or a really bad idea. But so this is at 7, I see something unique about me. So someone just saying, I've realized I have to think positively is not M7. Someone who, it has to be a unique sense of yourself and what you do. And M8, there's not just me, but there's other people. And there's the other person and how he or she is reacting. what's going on with them and what's happening that's going to help this conversation, help us to work together in a cooperative way. I feel like, in merit, the ultimate goal is community membership, which, back to the same themes, is not about harmony, but about cooperative bonds and people helping each other, regardless of whether they like each other or not. And people giving to one another and supporting one another, and in some ways, forswearing vengeance. So perhaps this is too far outside the scope of what we talk about, but for me, the idea of forgiveness makes most sense if you think of it, not that we're going to be buddies, but that I'm not going to get back at you. So if someone has done something terrible and hurt my child, or, oh my God, they really screwed me on this one particular thing, we might not be ever hanging out. And I may not, trust you around other things, but I'm not going to do anything to trip you up. I'm not going to do anything malicious. If you need something, I'll offer it to you, same as I would anyone else. So here, sort of in the spirit of in M8, I want to know about myself and the other, and I want to be able to figure out what we can do, given that we're two imperfect people with our own prejudices and our own problems. And the solution is not to create each of us to become more perfect, but to form some understanding of how to have this cooperative bond. And M9, the last, is having just a sense of how the world is. Worlds change. Organizations have needs. Stuff goes on. People don't fit when it seemed like they would. People die. People fall in and out of love. People make mistakes. And there's a kind of just acceptance that this is what happens in the world. And there's not a lot we can do about it. Maybe in some way, if we're trying to move Alex up to M9, is that he has limited power in this. Sometimes organizations are crazy. Even the best organizations are crazy. Even the best CEOs have crazy sides that get out of control. Sometimes people we care about have crazy vulnerabilities that get caught up, and that's just sort of what happens. And there's a limited sense of what to be able to do about it, other than to be somewhat sad that these things are necessary. So again, in merit, the idea is that there are these three whirling activities in all of our own minds. We're forming ideas about ourselves. We are forming ideas about others. And as we act and respond to the world, we're thinking about that. And there are different ways and different capacities for all of those. And the 9 levels of mastery correspond to increasingly complex ways of responding to and thinking about what we're doing in the world. It's fundamentally existential. I've decided in the end, the more we talk about it, that we're talking about as a being in the world, what am I doing and what's up?